is messed, but also I can remove this because my default microphone. Oh, worst streamer ever. Okay, let's go there. Remove that. Oh, there's no desktop audio because there's nothing playing. So let's go. There we go. That should be a good scene. Now I got to get my chat open because there are maybe people here. Hello, who's here? Anyone here? Hello? Maybe? YouTube and Twitch appear to both be working. Hey, Pebs! I have such, good news, bad news. Good news, I was able to make it online today, but, bad news, I had to reinstall Windows at around lunchtime because I was so excited. I bought myself a Corsair K57, oh, Josh isn't here. That's a shame. So this is a super fancy RGB, mechanical style keyboard. Here, I'll turn off the lights so you can see. Oh, fancy, fancy keyboard. And so I got this super fancy keyboard, and it didn't work. I plugged it in, and my system said, out of USB resources. So I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just sort of Google online, and there was stuff going on. Oh, and then so that didn't work with the mouse that I had. So I went and I bought the matching mouse. I have to hide my face if I want to zoom in on the mouse, I guess. Anyways, so I got the whole fancy super kit. And it still didn't work. So I went on, I started Googling my error message and everything, and it said, oh, delete this one key from your Windows registry, and everything will be fine, and it will work. And my computer wouldn't boot anymore. So I had to reinstall Windows. I have no software left whatsoever, so I had to, I've just spent the last 2 hours setting up OBS over again and all of my just everything I need to connect to this stupid machine, and just what a nightmare it's been. So hopefully, and so I guess the lesson out of that is it is such a good thing that I don't procrastinate and set up for the class in just the 2 hours before it starts, because I did all of the prep yesterday. I can put this is the prep course thing. I'll look around right here. This course is about you, so we go copy, because we now have week 6, and my plan for week 6. After we check in, so Josh, how have you been? Pebs, how are you doing? Maybe Rajat is here, maybe Glenn, any of our other regulars on site. But today's lesson, while I tell my stories, what are we saying here? We have, we're going to start with a bit of inspiration, because I really like a couple of these guys. And another day off fixing other people's or another day of fixing other people's bugs, and even more algorithm detail. I can say, and Pebs, how have you been doing? What have you been doing? Wait, what's going on here? So I have my list of lessons written twice. I should pay closer attention to what this is. Okay. And it is not searching. Doing good. Slowly studying and hacker rank. I have picked up on my hacker rank this week too. So I'm with you there. I had a bit of a slow start, because I've been doing the planning for this and stuff, but I did probably 2 or 3 hours over the weekend, and I was really happy with it. I'm sticking with the easy level questions because I'm kind of doing it to relax, um, and so the new job, it's it's really, I mean, it's really cool. They have such a great onboarding program. I haven't done any real work yet because I've only been 2 days, but like so I think we're at 146 people. So it's just sort of like this really cool small place where, in the last 2 days, I've met with the CEO, with virtually every C level uh, exec out of the team of 150. I finally got the answer as to what the maximum addressable market is. Yeah, it is really nice. You get to know everyone. It's a small team. The maximum, what I didn't know when I signed up was the maximum addressable market in the Canadian commercial insurance space is $6 billion, and I thought it was on the order of under a billion. I thought it was 700 million. So I thought, oh well, they're doing this insurance thing, and they're going to have a sort of maximum size. But with a $6 billion addressable market, and virtually, my understanding is that the competition in the space that they have with the commercial is they are so far out ahead. They have like a multi-year lead on other, right, but it is just commercial insurance. And so we're not looking at housing, we're not looking at auto, we're not looking at any form of personal injury or anything like that. We are really just talking about that line of commercial insurance where we're talking about sort of construction workers, beauty salons, car dealerships, like whatever dance studios, things like that. And that is a $6 billion market. And I didn't know that. And because it's this slice of the pie that the other big players are not serving, they're legacy players. So the legacy players don't have this technology solution around this, and they are really doing a great job of capturing that market right now, and they're scaling up fast. They have good funding, and so I think it's really exciting. They're really expanding, and so if anybody is on the stream coming around and saying, maybe I'd like to apply for places, well, Zensurance is actively hiring. We're at 150 now and trying to get to 200 by the end of the year. So that's sort of like, sort of in the space where Click was about 10 years ago. So where my previous employer was about 10 years ago. So it's kind of nice to get in at that small stage where you still have a chance to know everybody, but you know that it's stable enough and profitable enough that you're not risking your mortgage or your child's daycare or anything like that. So, yeah, if you want to reach out to Zensurance, anybody watching this video, you watching this video later on playback, hit me up through the channel and we will figure something out. We'll start talking. But yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really excited to get actually rolling on the stack. I got the code checked out. I got sort of a tour of the architecture and structure. So everything's pretty cool in that front. So I'm pretty happy with that. And yeah, no, it's just it's just really cool. And there was no stress. There will be stress in the future, but for the moment, we're in a really good, really good place. Really good start. And yeah, you absolutely could. You absolutely could. You know, we're small enough that everybody's base. I mean, no, that's not true. There are four or five different teams. Sort of like there's a Salesforce side. There's a so there's the Salesforce side. There's a front end because it's a website. The I think I've told you about their sort of unique selling proposition of how they manage to be successful is they just have all of these metrics and all of this data, and so they have this dynamic form that people in various commercial industries answer their questions, and it's a really nice and streamlined form. So as you answer one question, all of the other possibilities disappear, and it just focuses you down to as close as they can get to just giving you a price on the page at that time. And what's really interesting about that is traditionally in the commercial insurance market, that's something that takes weeks to months to get an answer on. And so a particular, like a construction worker could go, oh, so I call these guys up and it takes me a month to get my, insurance permit to work. Or I have this one where I enter my credit card number and I have it by tomorrow. And so it's just like they're doing such a good job of capturing that piece of the market that like they're doing, I think they're doing really well and really trying to grow. And a $6 billion market is pretty big for 150 people to try and take on. So there is definitely that scale aspect. So you know it's really exciting. I'm really excited about it. So I can turn off Restream. I can turn off this chat window. And let's see. So on to the lesson. It looks like it's just the three of us this week, which is fine. I mean, anybody can watch this back later. And if you recall from the coding interview prep list, coding interview roadmap, all of my saved bookmarks are gone too, or my codinginterview.com roadmap. Interview roadmap. So, having lost everything, I'm starting anew. So, the first part of this is sort of what you should be doing in your own time, and I've copied it wholesale across to the README. But so this is just a copy across, but sort of the things that we should be starting to focus on in terms of our hacker rank and LeetCode journey is start setting timers for yourself. Or if you're like me, and probably maybe I understand Pebs might be in this same boat, or start actually doing them. Because there is a, so if you have not started doing them yet, start doing them. If you have been doing them rigorously, you should be ready to set timers for your sessions. I'm going to have to log in on another screen to show you one of the features of LeetCode. Oh, somebody said something here. Yeah, well, we're maybe all a little behind, but it's okay. It's this is ongoing. This is ongoing professional development, and it isn't necessarily you know, isn't necessarily, it's not graded. This is not even pass fail. You all pass. You all get a pass. Sign in. I'm sorry. All of my logins are gone. I'm so sad. Okay, this should be me. Yeah, and the Tuesday, and just doing it every Tuesday. I figure after the 16 weeks are done, or 15 or whatever it is, after we get through all of the sessions, I'll probably keep doing it. Just maybe we talk about the types of things that we want. Yeah, so it's 14 weeks total, and we're on week 6 or week 7 because it's a zero-based array. So we're halfway. This is the halfway point. So it might be a good idea to start talking about the types of things that we want to cover and the things we want to discuss in an ongoing basis. I personally really want to dive into a few things and record actual videos about them, and it is the 12-factor app is one thing. So yeah, I'll talk about some of the directions that I'd like to go before we dig into the roadmap here. But so the first one is if you go to 12factor.net, this was written by, I believe, the staff of Heroku, and it lists a sort of structure and guideline or a set of rules or factors for the architecture of building cloud native systems. And so this is much higher level than sort of the individual algorithms. This is like, so it goes through the rules of so one code base per repository is one of the rules of, or one code base per application is one of the rules of designing a cloud native architecture. And I thought it would be useful to go through all of these over time and sort of make smaller videos of building that out. And we'll see. But obviously, for the 5 people who show up every week, we should all sort of come to terms with the things that we are interested in and the goals that we would like to talk about, so that we can, design an ongoing study group in a way where we're all getting what we want out of it. So yeah, okay. So if you like the sound of that, and the other one was, there's clean architecture, but I think clean architecture is even higher level than that. So those are just some of the things, some of the directions that I want to go. And I have logged into LeetCode now, and so, wait, have I? Yes, I've logged into LeetCode properly. So one of the things that, if you are following along based on the course and introducing timed practice into your sessions, LeetCode, for example, has the ability to create a session. So this would be starting, or call it study group, right? So you start a session, you create the session, and then you go, I don't know how to do it from here. Maybe I have to start another practicing round. To make a fresh start, create a new session, and click on the new session to activate it. Your progress will be tracked separately. So here you go. So this is what it is. You start another practice round. So you go into your problems now, and you're running in this, and so you kind of get your stats for where am I going to go? So I would go running sum of a 1D array. So you say given an array of numbers, we define a running sum. Anyways, I'm not going to do this right now, but let's see if I run code, then my stats should update in my session. In theory, meh. Anyways, the point is, if you're doing timed sessions, you can start using the built-in tools to track your progress, and then you can follow your score, and you can start gathering your metrics and making sure that you can fit the answers within the time that you have allotted in a 45-minute session. So it really is about training yourself to do this stuff. Now, couple of things off of the start, the learning objectives for today, outside of this reminder to the reminder to keep doing your leak code, to keep doing your hacker rank, to start doing timed sessions. We're going to try and spend a little time getting inspired by a few different developers who have what I think are really, really great stories to tell about how they went from being, how they got into the high end side of the tech career. So I thought Scott Moss. So you want to know how a kid. There we go. So if you want to find out more about Scott Moss first, he is currently an engineer at Netflix, but he has he's run I think he has some front end. Scott Moss has some courses on front end masters. As I said, he is currently at Netflix, and prior to that, he's actually launched a couple of companies on his own through Y Combinator and funded startups. So he has some just incredibly impressive bona fides. He's clearly a very good developer. He is a thought leader in the space, and he has a really great story to tell. So I go theater mode, get that big. And one of the things I did, Pebs, for you, and I hope that this works, is, and for everyone, but I think I finally got desktop audio working so it comes in directly through OBS. And so I've got headphones in. Anyways, we're going to see. So please let me know if you can hear this. It should be so clear. Let's try.
Kid growing up in the ghettos of Atlanta who barely graduated high school somehow found a way to make his way in Silicon Valley as an engineer at a FAANG company. Where you're in the right place, I got you. Listen up.
Right? It's nice.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Scott Moss, and in this channel, what I like to do is inspire people to follow their dreams, to reach paths that they didn't think they could have, to show them examples that they might not be able to see, so that they can go out there and be successful on their own. Now, a lot of people who are in a position of success love to talk about all the good things and all the things that they did right. So I'm gonna start off like that. I'm gonna talk about all the good things and stuff that you can Google and you can find out. Let's start there. And then I'll tell you about the stuff no one wants to talk about. So yes, I am a senior software engineer here in the Bay Area. I work at Netflix. Before that, I was a startup founder. I was the CEO of a developer tools company, a funded company that was part of Y Combinator, YC. If you've never heard of that, check it out. Pretty awesome program. And before that, I actually had a consultancy where I was just working with some of the biggest companies in the world. And that all happened because I learned to code. Now let's talk about all the things that no one wants to talk about, but I actually do, because without those things, I wouldn't be here. You really have to understand the story behind everything. Growing up in Atlanta, we lived in poverty. I'm talking food stamps poverty. I lived in single room hotels with 7 siblings. I didn't have my own bed until I was almost 18 years old, like that type of poor. But we did have each other, we had our family, and we were really close. Around 15, I decided to drop out of high school because it just wasn't for me. Even though some people would say I was smart, some people would say that I had a really bright future. It was just hard to concentrate on school when you didn't have food to eat, or you didn't have clothes that fit, or things like that. It was just really hard to concentrate on food and not concentrate on getting a job and helping your family out. Ultimately, I didn't succeed at that goal. I couldn't really get a job that paid a lot of money to be helpful. I think minimum wage back then was like less than $5. It was ridiculous. I decided to go back to school after dropping out for a whole year, and my GPA suffered. I mean, my GPA was probably like a 1 point something. I don't remember. It was debilitating. It sucked. Nonetheless, I kept at it and I worked hard, and I was able to graduate just 1 year late, where eventually I just shipped off, enlisted in the Navy, because I just had to get out of there. The counselors didn't really help me prepare for anything. I didn't really understand how college works. I thought you had to be rich and wealthy to even consider college. So after joining the Navy, I got shipped off to San Diego, which was pretty legit. Being on the East Coast and in the South my entire life, now living on the West Coast in San Diego, life was different. I remember getting to San Diego and just interacting with the people, and I knew right there that there's just a different lifestyle, there's a different way to live. Everything that I told myself I couldn't do was a lie. At that moment, just living in that city for one night, I realized there was nothing I couldn't do. I didn't even report to my station yet, and I already was like, I don't even want to be here. I got a whole nother 5 years left. Just seeing an example of how people live and how people accept other people was just amazing. So 4 years into the Navy, I actually got medically discharged because I had problems where I was getting dehydrated quite often, to the point where they were worried I was gonna have kidney failure out on a boat. So they decided to medically discharge me. So around that time, I'm like, all right, what am I gonna do with my life? I have the GI Bill, I can go to college, they'll pay my rent, they'll do all this stuff. What do I really wanna do? The Navy taught me a lot of stuff. It taught me discipline. It taught me that my limits can be stretched, they can be pushed. One thing it also taught me was that I was never gonna work at a job where I wasn't happy. I wasn't gonna sacrifice my mental health for the sake of a paycheck ever again. So I remember just getting on Google and looking up happiest jobs in the world. And every list that I saw, this thing called software engineer, programmer, coder, all this stuff. And I was like, what is this? This sounds, kind of familiar. I kind of knew what it was, but not really. I'm like, why am I not doing this? So my plan was to go back to school, maybe I'll go to Stanford, something like that, get a computer science degree. That didn't work out. Mainly because I just didn't have the patience, and I just didn't want to spend another 4 years in school when I just spent 4 years protecting the country. I just didn't have the patience for it. The path that I chose was a boot camp. A coding boot camp is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally a boot camp, except you go there to write code. It was honestly harder than Navy boot camp, not gonna lie. I remember being in boot camp in the Navy and I thought it was legit. We got a bed, we get fed 3 times a day, our clothes get clean, we get to exercise. I had a blast in Navy boot camp, but coding boot camp was really tough. And it wasn't until I started talking to my classmates that I realized everybody thought that way. Even the guy next to me who was like a PhD in neuroscience was like, yo, this stuff is hard. I don't know if I can do this. So that kind of made me feel good that it wasn't just me, and everyone just feels pretty stupid. After I finished that for about 3 months, I was getting job offers for over 100K. So if you go back and just look what people were making in the military, depending on their rank, I was probably making maybe 30K a year, 35K a year, to 3 months later, I'm getting offers for over 100K. That was pretty crazy to believe, not gonna lie. I remember my goal was just if I could just make 60K after 3 years, that'll be good. I can do a lot with 60K. I just didn't believe it. I remember just going home crying, right? Just wow, really? Okay. So once that sunk in, and I started working as an engineer, again, I had another epiphany similar to when I was in San Diego, where I realized, wow, there's a whole new world. It's a whole new way of living. The ceilings that I created for myself, maybe they don't exist. Maybe there's more to this. Maybe I can go further, and maybe there's nothing in my way but myself. And that's when I started believing more in myself, and I started doubling down on myself. I started investing in myself, and it paid off. And ultimately, that's how I got here. So the whole point of this video is I wanted to just share a story with you about someone who didn't take a traditional path into tech as an engineer. I never went to college. Like I said, I barely graduated high school. I'm definitely not a mathematician, but I work hard. I invest in myself. I know how to say no to distracting things. That is how I got here, right? My interest in engineering also, yeah, I need to be interested in it, but you don't have to be Steve Jobs to become an engineer, especially in a place like the Bay, where it's arguably some of the most competitive jobs and salaries out there. But you can do it if that's something that you want to do.
Man.
But I wanted to make this video to help inspire people to get themselves in a position to where they are pandemic proof, at a job in tech where, a lot of tech companies are actually doing well during the pandemic. So if you found this helpful, please leave a like, subscribe, because I'm going to be releasing more videos where I'm going to be talking to other people in the industry with unique paths. And I'm going to be bringing up different topics about how you could do.
There we go. So the first one, I just think that Scott has a lot of great content so far. A super small number of subscribers, actually. So, and also he's only been doing this since April, so he's quite honestly crushing me in the race. So he's he's someone probably to watch. There was another one in here. I'm not going to watch through all of them, but there were a few others that were really interesting, and so I think he's if you're looking for sort of your inspiration motivation piece, he's a good spot to start. Now, Ish is another really great sort of story of hard work and
Grammarly helps you work more efficiently, which makes accomplishing your work goals easier.
Very quiet and
I was just going to do the first aid of this one.
This is a talk I gave in 2019 at Swift Fest Boston, titled Programming with Purpose. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Ish. I'm an independent app developer from Southern California. I'm a father, a husband, a teacher, and sometimes a student. Today I'm going to talk about purpose. Purpose comes in all sizes, large and small. My small purpose for right now is to deliver an entertaining and engaging talk without embarrassing myself too much. My greater purpose for this presentation and for my life is to help as many people as I can in small ways every day. Small ways. Why small? Well, to answer that, we need to go all the way back to 1986. In 1986, I was 8 years old. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with my parents and 6 siblings. I was the oldest. I would love to say that it was a safe, healthy, and nurturing environment, but unfortunately it was kind of the opposite. It was a great place to work on your reflexes. It was kind of a tough time, and if you recall, I said 9 people in one apartment. I used to joke that it was so small you had to go outside to change your mind. Speaking of outside, we lived in South Central Los Angeles, which at the time was notorious for crime and violence. Kind of like Gotham, but without Batman. One of my chores in the evening was to take out the car stereo and car battery and bring them into the house. So if they were left in overnight, they would not be there in the morning. I went to bed to the sound of gunshots and police sirens, and occasionally the screams of someone who was not going to make it through the night. Then, in the morning, I would wake up and walk to school, sometimes with the evidence of the person who didn't make it on the curb. It was tough. School wasn't particularly safe either. I was bullied for how I walked. I was bullied for how I talked. Sometimes I was bullied because I was poor. And once I was like, hey, you're poor too, to the bully, and that did not go well. He didn't appreciate my insight. And also, my parents kind of dressed me funny.
I'm sorry. The deadpan delivery of he didn't, that's so relatable too, though, isn't it? Like, you think, oh, wait a second. I'm 8 years old. And wait, but you're poor too. I love this. I love this guy's piece. We're not going to do the whole thing, but like about the first 8 to 10 minutes is just, the whole thing is amazing. And so the link is on the repo. I highly recommend you go see this yourself. But like, I just love. I can't get over that. He didn't appreciate my insight. Like the bully's the idiot. Anyways, I like him. I like Ish a lot.
That's me in the middle. Now, clearly this is
handsome
picture day, so you'd think I was dressed like this for the photo. Nope. That bow tie was a constant thing because my dad thought it was a good way to go. And at the time, in the 80s, I wasn't allowed to wear denim or sneakers. I had to dress like this in a very tough neighborhood. So it was a rough time. My purpose at this time was basically just survive. I didn't feel safe at home. I didn't feel safe outside in the neighborhood. And I didn't feel safe at school. I wake up every morning with one goal. Just don't die. One day at recess, my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Mead, came up to me on the playground and asked if there's one thing in the world I could learn about, what would it be? Thinking back, I probably should have said self-defense. But what I said was computers. The interesting thing about that is that at the time, in 1986, computers were kind of like Teslas were 10 years ago. You may or may not have heard of them, and definitely no one you know owns one, particularly not in a neighborhood like this. So, Mrs. Mead nodded and walked away. A few months later, I walked into class, and Mrs. Mead was standing next to a computer. An Apple IIe. She called me over and started showing me how to use it. And honestly, this is one of the happiest moments of my life. I later learned that after our chat, that she had enrolled in a class at a local community college on basic computing. Then she used her own money to buy a computer and bring it into the classroom specifically to teach me how to use it. I get choked up whenever I think about it because that one moment changed my entire life. Slowly, my goal shifted from just trying to survive to learning everything I could about computers and technology. I started programming in BASIC the following summer. I would spend 8 to 12 hours a day just learning new things and trying to learn as much as I could about the technology. This was before the internet was even available. So 12 hours a day, no internet, that's dedication. Years later, my goals have shifted from learning about computers to finding ways to help others. I feel like I owe it to Mrs. Mead to help someone as much as she helped me. But that was a lot. I don't know that I can help a single person that much, so I try to help as many people as I can, even in small ways. Because the truth is, you never know that little nudge you give someone, the little help you give, where it will go. Little things become big things over time. I want to share with you 3 lessons I've learned that give me a larger sense of my purpose. The first one is being curious. Begin with curiosity. One of the things I learned from Mrs. Mead was the impact of curiosity. When she approached me, she didn't tell me what she thought I should take interest in. She approached me with curiosity. She asked, "What would you like to learn about?" If nothing more had come from that interaction, if she hadn't gotten a computer or any of that, she still would have had a positive impact on my day and probably made my week just by being genuinely curious about me and my interests. This quote comes from my dad. One of the things my dad used to say was, "Stop knowing so much and listen." That's kind of a crude way of saying it, but I think what he meant at the core was begin with listening. Mrs. Mead was able to help me in a transformative way because she listened first and then took action. That's a formula for success, and it's pretty much universally applicable. Start with curiosity. Imagine you have a fantastic app idea. Great. Who is your customer? What are their needs? How are you helping them? How are you not?
Anyway, so the rest of his story is actually really good too. But I thought the story of how he first moved into computers was just like moving. I've since watched it like 4 or 5 times, but I promise you, the first time I saw that, I was crying about 5 minutes in. It was just so good. And here we go. So Kevin Naughton Jr., he's the guy that we're going to be spending the rest of the session with, where he's... I'm really pissed off at this. I'm solving this at the same time, and I guess I'm somewhat distracted by having the sound in my ears, but I'm not seeing what my problem is there. Anyways, so we've got Kevin Naughton Jr., who is...
Hey y'all, it's Lauren from You know, the app that makes it easy to make a huge impression on video.
How's it going, guys? Today...
So Kevin was an engineer at some place. I can't recall, but he was an engineer at some place and he got laid off. He tells the story of his layoff, and I think this is somewhat analogous to the experience that I had, but also it's just sort of reassurance that, you know, you're not tied to the exact place that you're in right now, and like just feel secure.
And today I want to tell you about this exact day last year, so March 20, 2018, and how I was laid off from my first software engineering job that I've ever had.
It was a good story. I thought.
So guys, for anyone who's new to the channel, my name is Kevin, and I'm a software engineer in New York City. And I just kind of want to tell you a little bit about when I was laid off exactly 1 year ago today from my first job as a software engineer. So I remember this day pretty clearly, and it was actually 2 days before my birthday, which is really funny. And so I remember like getting up with Carly and, you know, walking to work, and typically like we'll walk together in the morning. And so we basically walked past my office, and then we ended up stopping in a coffee shop that we typically used to go to every day. And so we stopped and we got a coffee, and I had a little bit of extra time before I had to get to the office, so I decided, okay, like, let's just hang out and have a coffee together before we had to go to class. And so we order a coffee, we sit down at the table, you know, we're talking, we're hanging out, all of a sudden my phone buzzes, and, you know, not really thinking much of it, I get a Slack message, and it starts to seem a little weird when my boss, Nick, you know, all of a sudden asks me, like, hey, Kevin, do you mind coming to the office a couple minutes early today? And so, you know, I thought it was a little weird, especially because I'm actually, or I was, the first person in the office almost every day, aside from maybe 1 or 2 other people who would maybe beat me in sometimes. And so I thought that was kind of weird, so that kind of raised a red flag to begin with, but I just decided, okay, maybe, you know, who knows, let's just see what's up. And so I basically answered him, like, right away. And I said, yeah, sure, Nick, like, I'm actually around the corner, I'm just grabbing a coffee, and I just asked him, like, is everything okay? Because it sounded a little weird, and again, I just wanted to check to see what's going on. And so I started getting a little bit nervous when I responded right away to Nick, and he actually just didn't say anything. And so again, I'm like, oh, like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, like, you know, he's not ignoring me, like, maybe he didn't see it, maybe he's getting ready, maybe he's on the train, doesn't have service, like, who knows, maybe he's in the subway, and, you know, obviously that's not the case. So, okay, I think it's weird, I'm starting to tell Carly about it, like, we're talking about it a little bit, and I'm, like, joking, like, oh, like, you know, maybe I'm getting laid off. Nice joke, Kevin. And so, you know, eventually, like, Carly and I finish our coffees, she goes to class, and I walk across the street, essentially, to work. And so I walk into the office, and I see one of my coworkers, and again, it's just me and her in the office, right? Like, she's one of the only people who would beat me to the office, and it's just me and her. I said, you know, like, is anything weird going on today? Like, is everything normal? Did you get any messages from anyone? She said, no, like, everything seems fine. And I said, okay, like, that's a little weird. And I kind of just, like, hinted a little bit as to what was going on. I said, you know, Nick asked me to come in a little bit early today. It's kind of weird because I'm normally here super early. Like, I wonder why that could be. And so her and I start kind of piecing things together and just thinking about it. And again, we're kind of just like, oh, like, I don't know, like, I guess the worst case is, like, we're getting laid off. And so it seems a little weird, and stuff seems a little strange. But anyways, I just go into the office. I finish talking to my coworker. I sit down at my desk and I just start, doing my work. So I'm like working in React. I'm working on some front end stuff. So I just kind of go to work, put my headphones on. And probably about 45 minutes later, Nick comes into the office. And okay, so I start, trying to address the situation. I was like, oh, hey, Nick, like, how's it going? And he's like, oh, hey. And he's kind of short with me a little bit. And he just basically puts his stuff down, like walks into an office and disappears for a couple minutes. And a couple minutes later, Nick comes out and he says, hey, Kevin, do you mind, coming in here for a second? And this is when I'm like, okay, something is really terribly wrong. I'm probably losing my job. So at this point, I'm just expecting the worst. And in my head, I'm just like, it could be worse, right? Like maybe I didn't even have a job to begin with. Like, I'm going to be okay. It'll be fine. And so I kind of just walk into the office. And, lo and behold, it's exactly what you expect. They're telling me they have to let me go for X, Y, and Z reasons. And it's nothing that I did wrong. It's nothing about my work. It's nothing about me as a person. It's not personal. But the company has to let me go. And so that's okay. And it was fine. And it turns out that they laid off, like a handful of people. It was something that the company kind of had to do and had to downsize. And that's okay. I didn't take it personally. And, it was very friendly with them and everything was fine. Honestly, quite frankly, I was probably the easiest person you could have ever laid off. I kind of walked out of the office actually with my boss, Nick. He ended up getting a coffee. We shook hands. I said bye. I wish him the best of luck. And that was kind of it. And so every day after work, I would typically go to the gym. And so now I'm like, well, I guess I'll go to the gym. And I remember just walking to the gym and just thinking man, this is so weird. I feel a little bit lost. I'm not really sure what to do now. What am I going to do? And I just had all these thoughts running through my head. And the first thing I started doing was just telling my family and Carly and other people I just lost my job. And it was weird. It was a weird time. And I think the best thing that I did was just kind of make light of the situation and just kind of be positive about the stuff that was happening, even though it obviously wasn't super positive at the time. And so the first thing that I actually did was I went to the gym, I finished my workout, and then I ended up meeting up with Carly at one of our favorite sandwich places right below Washington Square Park called Orchard Street Grocers. And this is a place that I went to all the time in college. I went to NYU, so I used to go there all the time. The people I feel basically know me there. And we met up there, and I kind of just told her what was happening and how it went down and things like that. And I don't know, we just made jokes, and I think that was what made it so great, is from the very get-go, we were kind of very lighthearted about the situation, and I think there was even a point where she was like, oh, maybe we could do this next week, and I just made a joke. I was like, yeah, I'll have to check my schedule, see if I can get out of work early that day, or something like that. But I think the best thing that we did was we just kind of joked, and we just kind of made light of the situation, even though it wasn't something great that had just happened to me. And I think that's super important. You should just try and be positive, and sometimes it's hard, but in my opinion, it was just something that I couldn't really change. It sounded like it was just kind of out of my hands, and so I decided, I have two options, right? I could be really upset, or I could just kind of, see this as an opportunity to find something better. And I just chose the latter. I chose to try and see this as a way to get something better than, what I previously had as a job. And I want to definitely, kind of not even preface this with, but just say, I was very fortunate, and I had enough money saved up, and I was actually able to, take a little vacation and do some tutoring and kind of just casually browse for jobs. But I know that's not the case for everyone. I know, there are a lot of people who work day to day, paycheck to paycheck, and I definitely think I had the luxury of being able to support myself during a tough time. And so I decided, to take a little bit of time and definitely just at least enjoy my birthday, which was 2 days later, and push it off a little bit and just kind of take a little vacation and then decide, okay, I'm going to start looking for jobs. This is the date that I'll start looking, and this is kind of how I organize myself to actually look for these jobs. And I remember just with my last company, it was funny because it was 2 days before my birthday, and they would buy everyone a cake and everyone would sing to them. And so I just kind of made the joke that I got laid off because they didn't want to buy a birthday cake for me. I forgot to mention, but Nick actually gave me a letter of recommendation essentially. So when I walked out, he literally gave it to me. He said he typed this up this morning, and that this was to show to any potential companies who were interested in hiring me, that there was no bad blood. It was nothing I did. And I'm just going to read it to you guys now quickly. But it said, regarding Kevin D. Naughton, to whom it may concern, Kevin was a pleasure to work with. His thirst for learning, passion for coding, and willingness to dive into any challenge will make him a vibrant addition to any team. His friendly attitude, his kind spirit, and powerful assets that he uses. His kind spirit are powerful. Oh my gosh! His friendly attitude and kind spirit are powerful assets that he uses to forge strong relationships with his coworkers. Kevin had a phenomenal work ethic and is routinely the first person in the office. Was the first person in the office, and while there, maintains an excellent focus on the job. 3/20/2018. And the reason why I kind of tie this back in now is when I was studying for my interviews, I have a whiteboard right here and a desk and things that I would actually, that's where I'd study in my room. And so I made sure to keep that kind of near me and just remember this is where I was, this is the place I worked at.
That doesn't make sense.
I want to be these things, the things that he said, and I want to contribute to a team in this way. And I kind of just used it, as throwing wood on the fire. I just used it for motivation. I just remembered I have to work harder and I have to be smarter and I just have to be a better engineer, right? I have to be an asset that companies don't want to lose and don't want to let go of. Right. And so after my birthday, and I think about a few weeks, maybe a month, of just kind of hanging out, relaxing, and recharging my batteries, I decided to interview again. And so I faced a lot of rejection. I'll probably put up all the screenshots that I have because I made sure to save them of all the companies, or at least a handful of companies I had applied to. And this probably, I would bet this isn't even hit, but hopefully these are kind of coming on the screen now. But there are a ton of companies I applied to and just didn't get the job. And that's also a horrible feeling. But again, I just chose to be positive and believe that it was going to just lead to something even better. And so after a lot of interviews, even with bigger companies like Facebook and Google, I ended up landing my job offer for the company that I'm at today. And I just think that I was super positive about everything. I worked super hard when I studied for my interviews, and I believed that something better would come, and it did. And I got my offer basically at the end of June this past year in 2018, and it was amazing. And I felt like all my hard work had paid off. I felt like I was joining a company that I really cared about, and the people seemed awesome. I really loved everything. And
okay, I didn't. Yeah, I like that. I like that too. This, but I think the details are really, really fun there. This was the thing. This was the bit that I thought was really interesting about Kevin's piece there, and I forgot. I didn't stop to call it out. But like,
all the screenshots that I have, because I made sure.
If let me slow this down. This, you know how it gets really hard to like go through one of these interviews and get rejected, and you think, oh, am I not good enough? Am I not, like what am I missing? And so like I'm going to slow this down to 0.25, and you look at this, look at all of this.
Just kind of hanging out.
Here you go. So it's, bam, bam, bam.
All the
Like,
companies release a handful.
That's the same one twice.
That apply to, and this probably, I would bet this isn't even it, but like, hopefully these are kind of coming on the screen now, but there are a ton of companies.
It's like, I'm glad he's not watching this right now, because it's like slowing down your pain and going through it at at extreme slow speed. But I think the inspiring part about this is just like, look, rejections are normal. It's not you. Not you. Like, keep going. This guy, I'm not sure if he's at Amazon now. I think I Googled him. There was BuzzFeed, that Greenhouse. He kept trying for Greenhouse. Quora. Like, anyways, so it's like just so many rejections, just still going. And if you look up Kevin Naughton Jr. now on LinkedIn, Kevin Naughton Jr., LinkedIn, software engineer at Amazon. He's been there for 8 months. So it's like, anyway, like, just keep going. Just keep going. It's cool. You can get it. You can nail it.
I believe that it was going to just lead to something even better. And so after a lot of interviews, even with bigger companies like Facebook and Google, I ended up landing my job offer for the company that I'm at today. And I just think that I was super positive about everything. I worked super hard when I studied for my interviews, and I believed that something better would come, and it did. And I got my offer basically at the end of June this past year, in 2018, and it was amazing. And I felt like all my hard work had paid off. I felt like I was joining a company that I really cared about, and the people seemed awesome. I really loved everything. And I don't know, like, I think I kind of just want to talk about this to you guys today, sort of like unscripted, not a lot of notes, just because I think this is real, and I think this is something that like a lot of people experience. And I think, I actually know that people on my YouTube channel, some of my subscribers have actually told me, like, Kevin, I've been unemployed, or I was laid off, and this is how I feel, and I'm happy you told me this. And I just kind of want to like sympathize with you and like let you know, whoever's watching this, that like it does get better. And that I think if you guys do those three things, if you guys be positive, if you guys work hard, and you guys believe that something better will come, not because it will, but because you will work hard to get it, it will be better. And so I think you guys just need to make light of the situation if you're, if you're able to, and you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in that scenario where you can. I think you really just need to use it as fuel, right? Use it as the words that Nick said for me. And remember the things that those people tell you and the reasons why you're let go, and just use it as fuel to the fire. And really try and believe that it's going to end up, being in your best interest. And I truly believe, and I can truly say today that like being laid off, ironically, actually has been the best thing in my entire career thus far. And I want you guys to know that, because I think a lot of you guys might be in the same scenario. So do those three things: be positive, work hard, and believe something better will come because you're working hard. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If this video resonates with you, do me a favor, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. And I will see you guys.
Yeah. So, yeah, there were some, I think one of the things that I've read in terms of getting in at Amazon is that on average it takes people 3 tries to get in. And so they go into what they call the loop, right? So there's the pre-screen, or like you do a single one-on-one leak code, and that's cool. But like for Amazon, I'm told that you just got to apply, go through the loop, apply, go through the loop. And it like 3 times is what it takes to get through that. And yeah, that number of, I kind of want, like, why did he want greenhouse so bad? Maybe that's like a, like there's snap greenhouse.io. He was really into that. There were a lot from Greenhouse. Maybe that's a greenhouse.io. Is it a weed startup? Like, wow, like, what is he there for? Hire for what's next. So this is, okay, so this is potentially, anyways. Okay, so these guys hire for a bunch of other people, and so it's there. So Greenhouse is sending. Anyways, I thought that was really good and worthwhile in terms of just, make sure that you keep trying, make sure that you don't get discouraged. Like, Scott Moss's story, Shabazz's story, both of them, they came up through really hard times, and it takes work. It takes hard work to do it, but you can do it if you stick it out and you stick through it. So the other part that I wanted to cover and get to, I should talk about this one. This is not actually a paid reference. It's just so that if he does wind up getting a lot of clicks and they're from me, that he can track it back to my show. I just signed up for this, and I think it might be really interesting to follow up on. So I got the first email, and I'll bring that one up as well. I'm just going to log into my Gmail here. gmail.com, and we will look for Daily Bite. I have a Daily Bite in here somewhere. Daily Bite. Here's the Daily Bite. So the Daily Bite is an email mailing list that is actually created by Kevin Naughton Jr. So I found this while I was going through his code, and so he says, if you subscribe to the Daily Bite, you get a daily lesson, including stuff about this story. So some preamble where he tells you this, like, here you go. In programming, strings are data types that store sequences of characters. Depending on the language you're using, strings may be immutable. In Java specifically, strings are immutable. This is to help blah, 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 who cares? Because strings cannot be changed, which is what immutable means, because you cannot change a string, when you modify a string, it creates a new string entirely. And I wonder if this happens in C#, I don't know. But that means when you assign something to a string, or you use the concatenation operation on a string, it actually says, throw that piece of memory away, give me a new piece of memory, and start working with that one. And so he says, this is really important to know during technical interviews, because if you are doing something in a loop that modifies a string, and it can degrade your runtime, then he says, you can look for something called a string builder in Java. JavaScript, I think, doesn't work like that. I would be surprised if JavaScript worked like this, but these are really valuable things to know about the language that you are programming in. And then further down in his lesson, again, string methods. He says strings are super common in interviews. They're one of the most common data types, so you're really likely to run into this. And then he says, if you are working in Java, you want to know about the switching it to an array thing, so you can work on each of the characters in the array. Index of, split, and the just the whole thing about this is a really nice daily email. What's this? It's a 10-minute read maybe at best. Like maybe that's a 5-minute read. So, but what it does on a daily basis is it makes you, it reminds you of what you're trying to do. It just sort of keeps you in the loop. And I think his first dozen or so emails are supposed to be like this, where you follow a specific program, and then later on he starts sending daily programming questions. And so it would be like, if you try and solve the programming question as it arrives in your email in the morning, like a morning Sudoku or something, you get it was 88 milliseconds. Anyways, so if you try and solve the thing, that makes it like an interview situation where you are struck with a surprise question, rather than scrolling through the list of problems and maybe maybe getting one that you. How did I miss that one? Shuffle the array. Anyway, so I think that was an interesting resource to try and pick up on and use off of the internet. And we can go on. So the rest of today, we should look at the rest of Kevin's
Gatorade
channel.
0. Same electrolytes, 0 grams of sugar.
You told us what you want,
So many
and we
ads.
built it for you. Editor X, the advanced website creation platform.
How's it going, guys? Today.
Okay, so we'll look at the rest of Kevin's channel before we go into this, because he has, if we look through his videos, again, really great resource for, so far he's the best best person sort of giving the answers to the LeetCode stuff, and he had a premium subscription to LeetCode while he was working through, so he pulled these ones out and talked specifically about. He tells you who is seen in the market as having actually asked those questions. If I go back to LeetCode, for example, you can see. Oh, I don't know. There's no sidebar here. Notes. The one that he's using has a sidebar where it actually tells you who asks each of the questions. Anyways, so he has tons and tons of these, and the method that he goes through to solve them is, I think he has a really good style for these. So let's watch one and you can sort of see what you think.
Today I want to go over another LeetCode question. Today we're going to go over a question called longest common prefix, and this is a question that's being asked by Amazon right now.
Stop. There we go. Right over there. There we go.
Alright guys, so today we're going over a question called longest common prefix. Again, it's a question that's being asked by Amazon. And our problem description says, write a function to find the longest common prefix string amongst an array of strings. If there's no common prefix, return an empty string. So as a first example, if we're given the strings flower, flow, and flight, we would return FL. And the reason for this is just the fact that all of these three strings have the two letters FL at the beginning. Right? So again, flower has FL, flow has FL, and flight has FL. And the reason why this isn't FL plus something else is because if we actually look at the third character of each of these words, they're not the same, right? So flower and flow both have O's, but flight actually has an I. And so because of that, that's the limiting factor. We only have F and L as like the longest common prefix. So In example 2, if we're given dog, race car, and car, we would return an empty string, and the explanation here just tells us there is no common prefix amongst the input strings. And again, the reason for that is that there actually is no common character that these words start with, right? Dog starts with a D, race car starts with an R, and car starts with a C. So again, the first characters of all these words are different, and therefore we don't actually have a longest common prefix. They don't have any character in common. They don't start with any common character. So we have to return an empty string, because that is the longest common prefix. Okay, so how do we do this? So I feel like the logic is pretty straightforward. We're kind of talking through it. It makes sense in English, right? We just need to make sure that like the first character of every word is the same. And if it is, great, we'll add it to our variable called longest common prefix. And if it's not, we have to return whatever our longest common prefix is, and that will just start as an empty string. So again, in our first example, we would just go through all the strings and say, hey, do these all start with the same character? We'd look at the first string and say, okay, it starts with an F. Great. Does the next thing start with an F? It does. Great. Does the last thing start with an F? It does. So F would be added to our longest common prefix. And now we would just ask the exact same question, but instead of the 0th character, we would just want to know, are the first character of all these strings the same? And if it is, we would add it. And if not, we would basically return whatever we have. So that's like the simple.
Wait, have you watched ahead? Oh.
Simple case, makes sense, and it's as simple as that. The thing where it gets a little bit more complicated is when we have different length strings, right? So for here, we have something like car and race car. Let's say for some reason CAR started with all the words, right? So it was CAR something for each of these 3 words in our example 2. The problem would become when we look at the 3rd letter, right? Maybe the next letter is an E, but car actually doesn't have a 4th letter. So we need to make sure that we don't actually go out of bounds of any of the strings, and that's the other thing we have to account for. So we know that the longest common prefix in any of these words is limited by the shortest word, right? In the best case, I guess you would want to say, if we were given flower, right, for all 3 of our words here, we know that the longest common prefix, the longest possible one, would be just the entire word, right? So again, similarly, using the same sort of logic, the longest common prefix that we can ever have is actually the length of like the shortest word, right? So again, even if these 3 words started with CAR would have to be the longest common prefix because we're actually given the word car. It doesn't have a 4th character. So that's the other case we have to take care of. We have to make sure we don't index out of bounds of any of the strings that we're given. So let's start writing our code, and let's just first put a return statement, or sorry, a return variable that we can actually return that will give us the result we're looking for. So we'll say something like string, because that's what we need to return. We're looking for the longest common prefix, so it makes sense to call it longest common prefix. So longest common prefix. And we said this is just going to start as an empty string because initially we haven't checked that any of the characters all have the same first character or second character, so on and so forth. So we'll start as an empty string. And now it's always good to have that error checking, so let's just put our error checking. So if strs, or strings, is null, or the length of strings, so strings.length is 0, then we're just going to return our longest common prefix. And again, that's going to be an empty string, right? So if we don't actually have any strings, meaning it's null, or our length is 0, we'll just return our longest common prefix, which will be an empty string to begin with. Now, otherwise, we want to ask that question, right? Is the first character the same in all our strings? Is the second character the same in all our strings? That same logic. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to go through all the characters in the first word, just arbitrarily, because once we get to this point, we know we have at least the first string, right? Because we haven't actually tripped this if statement. So we can go through all the characters in the first string and basically just check, does every other string have this character that we're currently on at the same index? And if it does, great, we'll just keep checking all our strings. If we get through all of our strings, we'll add that character to our longest common prefix. And if not, right, if we've either indexed out of the bounds of any string, that's the limiting factor, that's the smallest string we have maybe, and then we know, okay, we can't have a bigger longest common prefix than that, so we can return it. Or if the 2 characters aren't the same, again, it's also the limiting factor, and we can just then and there return our longest common prefix. So let's start doing that. So we're going to say we're going to have an index to represent the character that we're on in any of the strings. So we're going to say in index.
For the lowest word length of the first and second word, compare the 2 words and remove letters from the end until if they never match, then you have no. Yeah, so you only run. Okay, yeah, I think. What did I think my solution would be for this? I think, and only going through once. That's pretty good, right? So if you truncate the string, I don't know, maybe
Equals
let's see what
0.
it does.
Now we say we're going to go through every single character in the first string just arbitrarily, but we really could use any of them. We're going to say for every character, so for character C in string 0.2 char array.
What number is it? It's number... Let me see. What time are we at? 6:16. Oh, have you found it all? Okay.
We need to go through all the other strings that we have and make sure that they have the same character as C at our index position. So we're going to say for means I equals 1. And the reason why we're starting at 1 is because we don't want to compare the current string's character with its own character. Right? That doesn't make sense. It's not helpful. It will always return true because we're just comparing the string to itself. So we'll start at 1. And while I is less than strings.length, so while we haven't gone through all the strings, we need to keep comparing, I plus plus. And now we have those two conditions, right? If we've actually gone out of the bounds of some string, then again, it's not possible that the longest common prefix can be longer, or the two characters don't match, then we could just return whatever we have as our longest common prefix. So if our index is greater than or equal to strings I.length, which again is going out of bounds of one of the strings, or if C is not equal to strings I.char at our index, then we want to return our longest common prefix. So again, if we've gone out of the bounds of one of the strings, or the two characters that we're looking at don't match, then we know we found our longest common prefix. And otherwise, right, if we've actually gone through all of the strings, comparing the character C, making sure that every other string in our strings at the index position has the same character, then we know, okay, we can append that character C to our longest common prefix. So we'll say longest common prefix plus equals C. And then the only other thing we have to do is actually increment our index, right? So that the next time we're not comparing the 0th characters anymore. We're comparing the first character or the second character, so on and so forth. So we'll just say index plus plus. So now, guys, once we've actually gone through all the characters potentially, right, unless we break early here, we'll have gone through all the characters in the first string, comparing them to all the other characters in every other string, and essentially populated or created, added to our longest common prefix, incremented our index. So once we break from this, we actually have our longest common prefix. So all we have to do is return our longest common prefix. Okay, so now before we submit this code, let's just quickly talk about the runtime. And again, runtime is all however you represent your variables, right? So for here, let's just think about what we're doing. We're going through all the characters in the first string, and we're comparing it to all the characters in every other string, right? So very clearly, we're going through every single character in every string that we're given. So I could say that's O of n, where n is just the number of characters that we're given in all of our strings. Or I could also represent this as two variables. I could say this is O of n times m, and let's say n is the number or the max number of strings I could be given in our list, and m would be something like the max number of characters that any string could actually contain. So again, you could say this is O of n, where n is just simply all the characters we're given in all of the strings in our list, or we'd say it's O of n times n, where n is just the number of strings we're given, the max number, potentially, and then m is the max number of characters that any string can contain. In terms of the space complexity, I would say this is constant space, right? We're not really doing much, we're just comparing a few variables, which is just constant. So let's run this code to make sure that it works. So if strings is equals null. So let's run this code again, make sure it works. If not, I just found it wrong, sorry. Now let's make sure it doesn't, obviously, again, this is supposed to be parentheses because strings have length with parentheses, whatever. Awesome, and now it does. So guys, that's how to solve longest common prefix in Java. Again, it's a question that's being asked by Amazon. If you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, do me a favor, leave the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. And I'll see you guys next time.
A lot of people don't know this, but the best way to make...
Okay, so which... Oh, shoot, what was that? Longest common prefix. I'm going to leave this one behind because I'm super distracted anyways. So, oh, here, you can just go... Longest common prefix. No. Problems. Can I sort by ID? Number 14. Longest common prefix. But you do have to go through each word. Anyways, we'll see how Josh does. Josh will tell us how it went. Okay, validate a binary search tree. This one, the number of islands, was an interesting one because it is a graphing problem.
How's it going, guys? Today we're going to be going over an interview problem called number of islands. And so this is an interview question that's commonly asked by a lot of companies. This is asked by Google, it's asked by Amazon, Facebook, Uber, Lyft, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Bloomberg, and the list kind of goes on.
Oh, here, let me zoom this up. So he has... I guess he has a different view because this is what's going on. Is the questions that appear on LeetCode have a whole bunch of tags related with them, and so for each question you can vote to say that you actually interviewed with Amazon or Google or whatever, and so you just have a better idea of if you are going to work at or if you're going to do an interview at Amazon, via LeetCode, you can. So let me see if I can find that. So let's go to some. And how do you see the full description? It's weird. I guess maybe I don't have that because I'm not premium. I don't know why I don't have that sort of editor shortcuts. Anyways, point being that's another useful way to figure out who you're.
Very good interview question to know. This interview question specifically has to do with graph algorithms. So I think, one, this is a super important topic in interviews in general, graph algorithms, and also I think this problem specifically is a good representation of how you feel about graph algorithms and graph theory in general. So I think this is kind of like a good judge to determine where you are in your studying and kind of see if you need to spend more time on this kind of topic. So the problem description says, given a 2D grid of 1s which represent land and 0s which represent water, they would like us to count the number of islands. And an island is surrounded by water and is formed by connecting adjacent lands horizontally and vertically. And you may assume that all 4 edges of the grid are actually all surrounded by water. So if we're given this grid, for example, 1, we only return 1 because there's actually just one island. So all these ones are connected, and they together represent an entire island, and then everywhere else in the matrix we don't have any other ones, so we just have one island. Whereas in example 2, we actually have an island right here, right? So these top left corner here, these 4 ones represent an island. This single one right here actually represents an island as well, because its cardinal directions up, down, left, and right have no ones. So that's an entire island on its own, so that's 2 islands, and in the bottom right corner these 2 ones also represent an island. So together we have 3 islands. And so we definitely need to traverse the entire matrix, right? So in order for us to actually accurately count the number of islands, we definitely have to traverse the entire matrix. So let's kind of piece this together like one step at a time. So I always like to have some error checking to begin with. So if our grid is null or our grid's length is 0, we just want to return 0 because we actually don't have, right? We have no grid, and therefore we have no islands to actually count, so we have no islands. So I think that's kind of a good thing to just have as error checking probably in all your problems, just in case, to kind of avoid weird edge cases, and it kind of ensures that the data that you're getting is safe for this function, which is good to have in practice. So now we definitely need a return value, right? And they're asking us to return the number of islands, so we could probably just have an integer and call this num islands. And obviously we have no islands to begin with, so we're going to start with 0. Now, we said that we need to traverse the entire matrix, right, which is represented by our grid. So to do that, we definitely need a nested for loop. So let's write out our nested for loop. So for int I equals 0, while I is less than grid.length, I plus plus. And now we need our inner for loop to actually go through every row in the matrix. So we'll say for int j equals 0, while j is less than grid of I dot length, j plus plus. Cool, so now we have our general format for part of the problem. And now we need to figure out the interesting case, right? So if we see a 0, we're not really interested. So that tells us probably that if we're on a 1, that's the interesting case, right? That's when we actually want to do something. That's when we care. So we can just have a quick if statement. So if grid of ij, or the index that we're on in the matrix, is equal to a 1, that's when we want to do something. And this is where the meat of our program is actually going to come in. This is like where all the logic kind of happens. So if we actually see a 1, we know that we've visited an island. Whether it's an island that's really big, like in example 1, it has a bunch of neighbors and takes up a lot of space, or whether it's an island like in example 2 that's just a single character, it has no connecting neighbors, we've definitely seen an island. So we want to increment num islands by something that we need to do, right? So in this case, like example 1, we want to make sure that we don't count all these 1s individually as individual islands. So what we can try and do actually is we can say, hey, if we see a 1, let's visit all of that in the one's neighbors. So we would eventually go here, and we'd go here, and we'd go here. And eventually we'd visit this one as well. So we need some kind of like backtracking. We need to kind of like, you can think of it like syncing the island, right? So we want to visit all the neighboring ones, sync them. So sync that entire island, like maybe flipping the grid to zeros, or the indices to zeros, so that we don't double count any ones. So what we can do is we can do a BFS or a DFS on this grid.
Get leaf filter and end gutter cleaning for life. Our professional teams have a proven process
to make sure that we're not double counting any ones and that we're successfully kind of like syncing an entire island. So we'll call DFS, which is a helper function that we'll write, and we'll pass it the grid so that we can actually access things in the grid, and we'll also pass it the indices that we're on inside of the grid. So now, once this entire these entire nested loops have run, hopefully we'll have populated the value of num islands, and all we'll actually have to do is return it. So we'll say num islands, and now we just need to write our helper function. So say public. This will return an integer, right? Because we're adding to num islands, which is an integer, and we'll call this DFS. We're passing in a character, 2D character array called grid, an integer I and an integer j. And so the first thing that we want to do is in all of these recursive calls, this function is going to be recursive, right? Because we need to visit all of its neighbors. So we want to check that the indices that we're given are valid. Or in other words, like we haven't traversed to something that's like outside this grid here or below the bounds here. So we want to do some error checking. So we'll say if I is less than 0, right? So meaning you've gone out of the grid on the left, or actually, I guess it would be above in this case because I represents a vertical direction, or I is greater than or equal to grid.length, meaning we've gone below the grid, or j is less than 0, meaning we've gone to the left of the grid, or j is greater than or equal to grid of I.length, meaning we've gone to the right of the grid or out of bounds on the right side, or if grid of ij is a 0, right, we don't really care either. So in this case, we just want to return 0. So in other words, if we've gone out of bounds of the array, or the matrix, excuse me, or the index that we're now on in any of our recursive calls is a 0, we're not interested, right? We no longer want to continue traversing. So if that's the case, we're just going to return 0, and our function will return and we're done. Otherwise, if the square that we're on, right, the index that we're on is a 1 in any of our recursive calls, we want to set the grid index that we're on.
What's that? Leet code detail. Can you actually share your... this is one of the things that I wish it would do, is I wish you could share your response. You did better on memory. Can you take a screenshot of your score or the code that you did and like put it into Imgur or something? We could load that up instead and see how you did. That might be a fun way to do it. We pick a problem and do it together, and like everybody puts their Imgur links, and I open the Imgur links in a different tab, so that in a tab that's off screen, so I don't accidentally show boobs. And somebody posts a racy pic to try and trick me, because you're not actually allowed to show racy stuff.
To 0, so we don't revisit it, right? This is the actual syncing of the island. And now we just want to visit all of its adjacent neighbors, right? So they said horizontally or vertically. So that means up, down, left, and right of the index that we're on. So we just have to call our DFS function on our grid with I plus 1, which will be to the right, the cell to the right in J. DFS of grid I minus 1, or sorry, I plus 1 is technically down. I minus 1 will be up. J. DFS of grid I stays the same now. J plus 1, which will be the
I
neighbor
see
to
what
the
he's
right
doing here.
now, and then DFS of grid I, J minus 1. which will be the neighbor to the left. And now, once we've successfully sunk all of the neighbors, all we need to do is actually return 1 to account for the original island that we're visiting in this call. So the original call from here, once all these recursive calls return, we just need to return 1 to account for the original island that we saw while traversing the matrix. And so once all of this runs, I'm hoping that our number of islands will be correctly populated, and all we'll actually have to do is return the number of islands. So again, this is kind of hard to understand. Recursion can be very tricky. If you guys would like a video to kind of explain how recursion works, or kind of walk through it more slowly or anything, please let me know, because these higher level ideas can be a bit tricky. But let's submit this solution and see if we get the right answer. Okay, line 20, we're expecting a parentheses. Let's see, these match up, so I is less than 0, or, so we accidentally put a semicolon there somehow. Awesome, and so our solution is accepted, and if we check out the runtime of our solution, we see that we pass 47 out of 47 test cases, and we are in the 96th percentile in terms of runtime. So guys, that's how you figure out the number of islands in Java. That's a common interview question.
Oh, here we got Josh's
graph algorithms. It's kind of tricky. It's like very high level to try and understand like what's going on in the recursive
Here
calls.
we go.
But if this isn't clear, if you guys need more,
one second.
More explanation.
Pause that. So here we go. How did Josh do? Accepted runtime distribution. Let's zoom in. Open image in new tab. Slow but great memory usage. Okay. Here we go. Full screen. Submit it. Okay. So 128 milliseconds. Does that put you like up here? Slower than like greater than 100% of every, like off the charts slow? Okay, and then this is, oh, that's right, your memory was amazing, but it was very slow. And so, what's going on? So the longest common prefix. Let prefix strings at 0. The min, so you're looping your... Right, okay, so, but, and then you have your compare. Prefix, so. Oh, and this goes recursive as well, so it's, you have, well, of course, I mean, recursive is going to go recursive. Faster than 5%. So I would maybe suggest that trying to find the faster one is usually, but it's usually finding the faster one is preferable in a code interview situation. I'm not laughing at you per se, but I am saying, yeah, right. And the stack trace would be massive. Yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying though. Is you still scale linearly if you go through the loop once, looking for the shortest word, and then. So you go through, you look for the shortest word, you find the shortest word, and then you only compare, or if you go through the length of if you update the number of letters you compare based on the shortest string, then you can get faster as you go further along the array. Anyways, it's interesting. There are just so many ways to solve things. That one's really interesting. Here we go. Binary tree. He said Google's favorite
Here's an honest
question.
way to make yourself $800 or up to
That's right. You loop
per household
only
and get
the
to
minimum
be for the
size of the overlap.
How's it going, guys?
which-
Today we're going to be reviewing another interview question. We're going to do this again on LeetCode. Today we're going to go over a problem called binary tree longest consecutive sequence, and this is a question that's currently being asked by Google right now. Alright guys, so today we're going over another interview question. Today we're going to go over a question again on LeetCode as always. Today the is consecutive.
Whoa, what did I do?
Sequence of nodes from some binary tree. Alright guys, so today we're going over another interview question. Today we're going to go over a question again on LeetCode as always. Today the problem is called binary tree longest consecutive sequence, and this is actually a question that's being asked by Google and Facebook right now. So it's definitely a good question to know. It's definitely a good question to go over. And our problem description says, given a binary tree, find the length of the longest consecutive sequence path. The path refers to any sequence of nodes from some starting node to any node in the tree along the parent-child connections. The longest consecutive path need to be from parent to child, cannot be the reverse. So meaning we have to go down the tree, we can't find connections up the tree. So if we were given this input in example 1, so if we had the tree that looked like this, we would output 3, and the reason for that is because they tell us the longest consecutive sequence path is from 3 to 4 to 5, so we would return 3, right? So that's 3 nodes along our path, so we're going to return 3, and again, the 3 nodes that make up that sequence is 3, 4, 5, right? So 4 is 1 more than 3, so it's formed in our chain. 5 is 1 more than 4, so it's also formed into our chain. So now we have 3 nodes that are consecutive in our sequence, so we'd return 3. Now if we go to example 2, and we had a tree that looked like this, we would output 2, and they tell us that the longest consecutive path is 2 to 3, not 3 to 1, so we're going to return 2. So again, they're talking about this path here, 2 to 3, and again, we can't go up, right? So it can't be 1, 2, 3 like that. So that's not a valid answer, and because of that, we have to go with the smaller path, I guess, here, which would just be 2 to 3. Alright guys, today I just want to take a quick second to interrupt, and before we go into our solution for today's problem, I just want to introduce today's sponsor, Rooftop Slushy. Rooftop Slushy offers a whole suite of services like direct referrals, resume reviews, offer evaluations, and more to try and make sure that you guys can land jobs at places like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. If you guys have trouble getting interviews at those kinds of places, this is the perfect service for you. For an average cost of $30, you guys can, 1, get a direct referral to any of these places from an actual FAANG engineer who works at that company, or you can also actually ask for a resume review for a cost of $30 on average to make sure that you're tweaking your resume, you have it up to date, and you're putting your best foot forward to make sure that you guys get an interview with these companies. So if you guys are interested in checking out Rooftop Slushy, be sure to check the link in my description. It will give you 10% off your first purchase, and I really, really hope that you guys use it along with my channel to land your first job at FAANG. So how do we solve this problem? And let's just kind of talk about it quickly. So I think the first hint, and I feel like this happens a lot with tree problems, is that we're going to use recursion to traverse the tree. Right, so that's the first part. We definitely want to basically traverse the entire tree here because we're always trying to find a longer consecutive sequence than we might have right now. So we're going to use recursion to try and traverse the entire tree. And then once we can actually do that, right, once we can traverse the entire tree, we just need to figure out what we need to ask, right? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And the problem that we're trying to solve is finding the longest consecutive sequence. So we know that if we're on a node that has value, let's say 1, we need in our recursive call to find a node that has value 2, right? Because the next recursive call is going to go deeper into our tree, and if that node matches the previous node's value plus 1, then we actually can form a sequence, right? A consecutive sequence, and then once we actually form these sequences, we just need to make sure that we're keeping track of the maximum at all times. And if we could basically traverse our entire tree asking that question, does this node's value match this node's value above it, right? Plus 1, then we actually have a sequence. So we can keep asking that question as we traverse our tree, and we just need to update some sort of variable to keep track of our maximum that we've seen throughout the whole recursion. So what we first want to do is just declare and initialize a return value, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say int array max equals new int 1. And a lot of people are probably interested and are thinking, you know, Kevin, why are you actually initializing an integer array? Why can't you just initialize, for example, like an integer or primitive? And that's because we need this variable to actually exist in all of our recursive calls that are going to come onto our stack. And the reason for that is because we need to have this variable available in any recursive call so that we could actually update it with the longest sequence that we've found. So because this is an integer array, it's going to be allocated on the heap, and therefore it's going to be available in all of the recursive calls that we're going to make. So that's why we're going to use an integer array here, and this is again just going to keep track of the max sequence that we found. Great, so now if you guys watch my videos a lot, you guys are probably very sure of how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to make a call to a recursive function, right? I always like to call it a magical recursive function. That's going to do our work, and then all we should have to do is return whatever's in this max variable. So I'm going to call this recursive function find longest consecutive sequence, right? Because that's actually what it's going to do for us. Now we just need to think about the things that we have to pass it, right? Well, the first thing is we definitely have to pass a reference to the tree so we can traverse it. So I'm going to pass the root. And now the next thing that we need to think about is we need to count, right? We need to keep track of how many nodes are in the current sequence that we have. So I'm going to pass a 0. That's going to, you know, basically symbolize or represent the count of how many nodes we have in our list or our sequence right now. The next thing we need to pass is a target, right? I need to know what value we're looking for in every single recursive call, but at this point we actually don't know if we even have a root, right? Our root could be null, so I'm just going to pass an arbitrary 0. And that's going to represent kind of like this target value that we're looking for initially. Great, and then the last thing we need to pass is just our max, right? Because we need to make sure that we have that reference in that function so we can always update the max as need be. And then if we actually did this correctly, guys, all we'll have to do is return max of 0. Great, so now this problem really just boils down to traversing the tree, right? How are we going to traverse this tree and update this maximum variable to always hold the longest consecutive sequence that we've seen? So because it's updating our max, we don't actually need to return anything. So I'll just say public void find longest consecutive sequence. And then we said we're going to take a tree node, we're calling it root. We're going to take an integer that represents the count, right? How many nodes are in our consecutive sequence right now. We're also going to take another integer that's going to represent the target or whatever value that we're hoping this node in this recursive call, its value is going to be equal to. And then we're also going to take an integer array called max that will just help us keep track of the maximum consecutive sequence we've seen throughout all of our recursive calls. Great. So now with recursive functions, right, we just need to keep track of two different things, or we need to have two different things. The first thing we need is a base case, right? We need to tell our recursion when to stop. And the second thing we need are recursive calls, or maybe a single recursive call, but we always need a recursive call as our second thing in recursive functions. So let's just stick with our base case for now. What is our base case, right? When do we want to stop our recursion? Well, we want to stop our recursion when we get to the bottom of the tree, right? When we're on a null node. So I could say if the root is null, we just want to return, right? We want to stop our recursion. There's nothing else to traverse. Well, okay, if we haven't hit our base case, what do we need to check, right? What problem are we trying to solve? We're trying to solve the problem of the longest consecutive sequence, right? So what we really care about in this problem, and the meat of this problem, is going to be if the current node's value is equal to the target that we have. So I'll say else if root.val is equal to our target. And if that's the case, then we just need to increment the count, right? Because we want to include the current node within our current consecutive sequence. So I'll say count plus plus. And otherwise, what happens if the current node is not null, but its value does not match our target? Well, that just means that we've broken whatever consecutive sequence that we have currently, and we're going to keep looking starting from the current node that we're on, right? So that really means that the count gets reset to 1 here. So now once we actually have checked those 3 different conditions, we just have a couple more housekeeping things to do, right? One of which is making sure that we're always updating our max, right? So I want to make sure that I'm always reassigning my max to be whatever the maximum is between the max and whatever our current count is. Great. So now once we've done that, all we need to do is continue our recursion, right? We need to keep checking if we can add the next level to our consecutive sequence that we have. And if we can't, we just need to restart trying to find a new consecutive sequence from these 2 subtrees. So that just becomes as simple as saying, make a recursive call to the root's left child,
passing the count that we have, with the new target being the roots value plus 1, right? Because now we want to say the next level has to match this node's value plus 1. And then we just need to pass our max as well so that we make sure we always update it in those subsequent recursive calls. So I'm just going to copy and paste this now and say root.right, right? Because we're going to traverse the current node's left subtree and right subtree to make sure that we find the longest consecutive sequence throughout the whole tree.
It's 5 men disguised as freight handlers flying away with $400,000.
So now once these recursive calls all bottom back up to our top level recursive call, hopefully max 0, right, we'll actually store the maximum consecutive sequence that we've seen throughout the whole tree. So all we'll have to do is actually return it. So now to talk quickly about our runtime and our space complexity. Well, our runtime, we're just going to traverse the entire tree, right? We're going to go down the entire tree looking for this longest consecutive sequence. So we'd say that we're traversing the entire tree, and if we said the tree had n nodes, we could say that the runtime is O of n. In terms of our space complexity, the worst case is going to be when we have like a giant linked list that just goes one way, which means that our recursive calls are going to be n levels deep, so therefore we'd say that our space complexity is also O of n. So for this problem, our runtime is going to be O of n, and our space complexity is also going to be O of n. So now let's run this code, let's make sure that it works. Awesome, and it does. Alright guys, that's how to solve binary tree longest consecutive sequence in Java. Again, this question is being asked by Google right now. If you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel below, and I'll see you guys next time.
Do that. Make sure he gets his like, and I've subscribed. Why is he using an array for the max? Well, let's see what his solution was again. So stop there. So what is that? That's number 298, right? So problems. Page 3. It's a locked question, so we can't actually see it.
For space complexity, and then once 3, 2, 1. So we're going to.
So the output is 2. I don't know. I should have paid closer attention, shouldn't I? Let's look at his final solution again. Max is a new int with a length of 1. I wonder if his solution here is because if you look at this, so int max is 1, and he's passing the array in. I suspect that he's doing that so that he doesn't have to return a value. It's okay, this makes sense. So the array, by using an array, it's passed in by reference, which means the value of the array at 0 is writable within the recursive function. And so you see what he's doing here. He's using his assignment. It's passed by reference. So, I mean, I don't know Java that well. I assume that they actually do have a by ref keyword, and so he's probably just doing, I think he's just doing something fancy because, Java passed by reference. Int is that by create, so I guess the value must be immutable or something because they don't seem to have mutable int. Passing the array seems to be a lot easier than including the immutable integer class, and just that seems like a lot of work. Anyways, we're closing in on the end of the session. I hope that the sound balance was a lot better. I think that was a lot probably a good thing. Yeah, so it's a bit of a hack. It's probably a good thing that my computer died today, because I took the time to actually set up the desktop audio properly. But next week will be, if we look at this, so next week is scheduled to be more algorithms. And they're next week is intended to be, oh wait, week 7, no, it's not system design interviews. Yeah. Oh, some vids are lower sound than others. Right, because I don't have the, I have the volume on the TV, but the sound is far less echoey because it's coming in direct. So I wonder, what's my desktop sound at? Right. I can try and figure that one out as well. I know Hasanabi is a Twitch streamer who does stuff, and he has an additional volume knob on his Chrome. Let me look at this code interview roadmap again. Codinginterview.com interview roadmap. So 6, 7, and 8. So this is supposed to be 3 more weeks or 2 more weeks of algo. But we've already done 2 weeks. Oh, 76 milliseconds fast. Do you have a new one? I want to see what this new solution is before we go. That's pretty exciting. Yeah. So, and we have to stick around to see Josh's solution anyways. But we've got 2 more weeks of algo stuff, then only 2 weeks of system design stuff. And we've already had 2 weeks of algo stuff. So I'm wondering if we lop off week 8 from system design, from algos. I think we do 1 more week of algos, then do 3 weeks of system design, because system design is actually pretty complex, and I think there's a lot more we can do. So that's what I'm thinking. But I think next week we'll do some more algos and go from there. And we will, hold on, is this Josh's better solution? Okay, this already looks better. Open image in new tab. Right, once you start playing the algo game, it gets to be a lot of fun. Look at this. So your memory is better and your speed is. I always get most excited about the speed solutions. I don't know why, because sometimes memory comes up in this stuff. But so, and this, are you solving this the same way? So the prefix is equal to strings at 0, so that you start, the prefix you start with is the first element in the array, and then you start at the second element and you move forward. And you are not doing, right, you got rid of your recursion, that makes sense. So you say prefix substring, the minimum length of the, so this is the prefix, the substring, and wall the length, okay, and then you tick down, and then, right, but how do you, oh, because your prefix gets set right there. Okay. Strings at I equals, okay. Break. There you go. Well done. Right. Right. And if there is a match, you move on. And then because the prefix has already been set to a smaller value, each subsequent run shrinks less. No. This is I mean, first of all, we're at the end of the lesson because it's closing in on 9 o'clock. But this is exactly what I think is more fun, is if we start participating and sharing each other's solutions, and like using the time that we have together to sort of motivate each other, and then get excited by others' solutions and learn from them. I really like this, right? Like this shrinking the prefix on each loop means, yeah, it's just a good solution. It's great. But anyways, that's the week. Josh wins the crown of the best solution provided. And I hope that we enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again next week. And I will wave.